Tonight, Steve tells us about his drug use.
And I've done Lego in the foot before.
Cameron dismisses animal pain.
Sometimes you'll look at the animal and they look peaceful.
And I'm basically David Attenborough.
Nature just do.
Alrighty, so what we're going to do today is take a look at a dialogue between Joe Schmid, Alex O'Connor, Trent Horn and Cameron Bertuzzi. Within their conversation, it's quite a long conversation, of course linked below, Joe brings up a variant of the problem of evil, and by my lights, it's an incredibly persuasive one. I think that this argument, in and of itself, does a serious dent into pretty much every organised religion, especially those of an Abrahamic variety. And it relates to evolution by natural selection.
It was 2020. There were these fires in Australia, and tens of thousands of koalas were burned alive. Now, that's just Australia. That's koalas. These koalas are suffering, being burned alive. That's just Australia, just a few weeks of forest fires. Think about the whole world now, not just Australia. Don't now just think about a few weeks, think about a few years. Now think about tens of thousands of years. Now tens of millions of years. Now how about hundreds of millions of years? It's mind-boggling.
I know he's talking about Australia, and I was just sort of thinking, it's like, a koala's the only Australian creature that's not out to kill you? But then I think they nicknamed them drop bears.
Yeah, they're drop bears,
because they fall on you.
They're drop bears, yeah, they are quite.
So they are out to
bears.
kill you.
So they deserve the fires that descend upon them.
Yes, that's true.
It's God's punishment.
It's God's punishment for falling on people's heads.
Which he designed them to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
But obviously the argument here is look at this horrible thing that's happening, essentially.
And I like the way that Joe's doing it. So he's saying, look, you can picture when you watch the television and you see this poor koala charred. Well, extrapolate that out. What if you're seeing, years of this, tens of years, tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of this? This is what you need to have in your mind before you hear his argument.
Well, Joe's done something quite important here that I think a lot of agnostics and atheists miss, that Christians tend to nail, and it's build a narrative.
Yes.
If you can build a narrative, you can more emotionally attach people to the subject that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
He's doing it quite well there.
Yep.
I guess we should just say natural reality is indifferent to the flourishing and languishing of sentient creatures. That's not as surprising. Nature's red tooth and claw. There's nothing down there that cares about the flourishing of sentient creatures.
I just said precisely.
Precisely.
So there's just not a lot to add to Joe there, to be honest.
Well, what I like about it is he's doing this simple explanatory value comparison. He's saying, look, you've got theism and then you've got atheism. Which of these are going to better predict the data of all of this absolutely insane suffering that we know has occurred throughout history? And that setup is going to do a lot of the work, because if you're a theist, especially if you believe in omni-max theism, which theists do, at least most theists today do, then you're going to have a certain expectation of what the world might look like. And some facts might surprise you, some might not. And the same is true as if you had an atheist view, which here would be more akin to a naturalistic view, a view where there's no God in the world.
Without a God, nature just does its own thing. And nature doesn't really care how much pain you're in.
Exactly. And
it's not even doing what it wants to do. Nature just do.
Yep.
So given that it's surprising on one hypothesis and nowhere near as surprising on another, we have some evidence for the hypothesis on which it isn't surprising. So that's an argument that we could consider.
So yeah, as we said, I think that is about as perfect a way of just outlining the problem of evil and why essentially a naturalistic worldview will account for it, whereas he's essentially just proposing, you're going to have to deal with this.
Yep, you need a solution to this if you're a theist. And what he means by that, again, is if you buy into God's attributes being as Scripture says they are.
Has Scripture actually said that God is all-loving? Because it's quite often shown that he's vindictive and...
Well, if you talk to the average theist, they're going to tell you that God is all-loving.
Christians will tell you he's all-loving, but it's like, is that what it actually says in the Bible? Because I'm not...
They've got like their own, they don't like, us redefining terms, but they say that God is all-loving while enforcing genocide. So if you want to talk about language games and the way that they get involved, then you'll have a clearer understanding. Yeah, okay.
The way that I see it, it's just a matter of prediction. So maybe there are these necessary connections. Maybe, but I mean, conceivably, epistemically, it definitely could have been otherwise. I mean, maybe they just have some sort of built-in anesthetic, such that when the zebra...
I love the idea. Well, we could make it better if they had some anesthetic.
But the thing is, right, so I had the pleasure of going to Oxford to watch, what was his name? Oh, super famous.
3 weeks later.
Richard Swinburne, right? So it didn't take me too long to get that, thank you, editor, appreciate it. So Richard Swinburne, when I went to see him debate live, funny enough, Alex invited me, so I was seeing him live because of Alex. I had the opportunity afterwards to have a beer with Richard. Bought him a beer, and I said to him, how do you deal with animal suffering that's existed over, hundreds of thousands of years, frankly, hundreds of millions of years? Mm-hmm. And his answer was this. You ready? They didn't feel pain.
And he knows that. Yeah.
Apparently so. Like that was his position. So when you hear people here going, well, maybe they've got anesthetic, he's not taking the mick out of theists. He is actually putting across what they say when it comes to these defenses.
Well, I just took that as Joe's proposing that we can make a world better than we have by just having animals that are on the verge of death.
Yeah.
You can ease their suffering with a built-in anesthetic, the emergency button of, I don't want to feel pain anymore.
And I'm telling you, theologians really defend this as if it's a real thing.
Okay.
As if it's real.
It gets the claw from, or whatever, it gets like the teeth from the lion, some sort of built-in anesthetic. Like, I don't know, there's some sort of psychophysical law that just kicks in and they don't feel any suffering, but the lion can still have its meal and so on.
But here's where my problem comes.
So we have covered it, but so what Joe's essentially outlined is a workaround to the problem of evil by suffering ends at the point where it's no longer helpful for survival.
Yep.
If you're at the point of you're going to die anyway, no matter what happens, there's a built-in trigger, suffering ends for you.
And that
so obviously that is not the world we live in.
No.
But that is what Joe is proposing as an alternative world that would solve the problem of evil for theists.
It's also something that you would think is more probable on theism. So if that was the case, actually that would be a bit of evidence towards theism.
Yes, and obviously essentially one of the things, Joe's not said it here, but it's kind of implied by what he's saying, is the fact that a human being can come up with this solution for one of the biggest sort of flaws in the world, if you want to sort of view it that way, or at least the flaws in the idea of an all-loving God.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that a human can come up with that, and yet God hasn't implemented it, is kind of a knock against God either existing or at the very least being an all-loving God.
I noticed I had the qualifier that God does not excessively interfere in the system.
Well, these are psychophysical laws built in from the get-go.
No, because then...
Yeah, so Joe was right. He's saying this isn't God then reaching down to end the suffering of the animal. This is built into the animal kingdom. That's what Joe is proposing.
Yeah.
Somehow Trent doesn't seem to be picking up on that. I'm not very happy with this sort of, well, no, God thing already. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see.
Because normally when an animal experience, any of us, we're animals, when we experience pain, it motivates us to act in an extremely aggressive way to promote our own survival.
True, but the example Joe gave was when a lion has got its, teeth around your throat.
Yeah.
At that point, feeling pain is not very helpful for your survival, because I'm not sure how you're going to be motivated to get out of the lion's jaws at that point. The lion's probably got what it needs to do to get you dead.
I guess another way of phrasing this would be, suppose that evolution by natural selection, as brutal and as callous and as undiscriminatory as it is the only way that God can actualize the best of all possible worlds. For one, I really don't buy this. I think this is one of the most absurd claims that a theist has.
I think creationism is actually more in alignment with the idea of
way more, and that's why they had to be dragged kicking and screaming into accepting evolution. Trust me, they didn't want to, right? But if you are to accept evolution by natural selection, then you're going to want to be able to make sense still of what's happening and what's not. And what Trent is proposing here is that in addition to buying this indiscriminatory, horrible state of affairs, you also have to buy that God has to make it so there isn't like a blunt law where if the conditions are such that the poor, sentient, normally innocent creature is about to die, the pain receptors shut off. For some reason, God couldn't do that. an all-powerful, all-loving being couldn't do that. All he could do was go, no, I've chosen for the option where, in general, it's good to feel pain because it helps you to survive. And therefore, sorry, buddy, but when you're stabbed and then you're paralyzed as the insect or the spider eats you from the inside out, that's just the best of all possible worlds. It's all I could do. I'm sorry. And yes, I designed them to consume things this way, but it's the best of all possible worlds.
I think it's tough listening already. I know it's like anyone watching me is like, you've only given him a few seconds, you're already annoyed with him. It's like, yes, because Joe is criticizing the framework. Trent doesn't seem to understand that, and he said he's assumed the framework is what it is, and then he's trying to explain how to make sense of it. Yeah. He's not acknowledging that Joe is criticizing that the framework is the way it is.
Yeah, and I'll just to reiterate that, it's not an annoyance at Trent. No, not at all. It's just
it is on me.
Well.
No, I just it's not an annoyance at Trent. It is this that he's talking past Joe.
Yeah, and I think Joe's being really clear.
I think Joe's been very clear.
Yeah.
So what if in some circumstances when an animal is attacked, that immense amount of pain is what allows it to escape the attack and then to go on living? And so then you'd say, well, maybe there's a psychosocial law where the animal doesn't feel pain when there is no possibility for escape. It's like, but there's no real biological mechanism. Right. It would seem like God would end up having.
God is an omnipotent being.
But that's what I think.
Yeah, but then he'd be interfering.
There is no biological mechanism for that. And Joe's like, yes, but God's an omnipotent being. Why could he not have built one?
Yeah.
He's not saying God needs to interfere. He's like, why can God not have built the biological mechanism?
Yeah, you don't need an intervention if God built the game better.
I love Joe's look here. He's smiling. He's like, "You're not listening to me, are you?"
Yeah,
that's what I've got on Joe's
pain. I don't know if you know, but he's responded so many times to Trent, and most of it's like, "Oh, listen to what I'm saying. Damn it! God gave you 2 ears. Fucking use them. At least use one." No. To give an analogy, it's as if Joe has said, "Look, the rules of chess are set up so that these pieces can do this and that, and it's been built." And
you've got to destroy all the pieces to win.
Yeah, that's it. You've got to destroy the pieces to win. Basically, you've got to destroy a lot of the pieces in order to get to the king, right? In order to checkmate him. And then what Joe has said is that this isn't a game that seems to have been built by an all-powerful, all-loving God. You wouldn't expect this destruction, this nasty state of affair, this need for murder, exactly. And then Trent has effectively responded by saying, well, perhaps killing the pawn is the only way that the queen can get to the other side to checkmate the king. And Joe's like, God created the board. He can make it so that that's not a necessary condition.
He can make the rules whatever he wants the rules to be. That's Joe's point.
Yeah, and I have to say that when it comes to really difficult objections to theism, it is amazing how often even very smart people like Trent just don't seem to get it. It's like, is this deliberately obtuse?
Yeah, I do. I always wonder when I hear these things, especially when it seems to be coming across so simply. It's like, are you missing the point on purpose?
Yeah, William Lane Craig does this a lot.
I know he definitely misses the point on purpose.
Yeah,
God would end up having.
God is an omnipotent being.
But that's what I think.
Yeah, but then he'd be interfering.
Yeah,
no, sorry, Alex.
Sorry, bro.
You've missed him, so maybe it's not just Trent then.
It's not just Trent. It's
Alex.
Joe, you need to learn to communicate, Joe. Unbelievable.
What I'm saying is God creating a natural system will inevitably entail things that are more or less perfect in competition with each other.
There was too many things. If God creates a natural system, it will inevitably, anything is a problem in your statement there, because how do you know that God can only do it this way? And then, I'm sorry, that last bit, a natural system, what was it? A natural system will always create one when they're working in competition, perfect competition feature.
Yes.
What's he saying?
Yeah. So the only way that someone like Trent is going to be able to justify these horrendous things that we see in the world, and I should say things that look horrendous to us, because that's the way that he's going to be looking at it, is if there is no other way that God could have maximized so much good.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, what he's driving at here is that maybe all of this competition is just the price he had to pay in order to establish the world that we have today. Now, this may strike you as it strikes me.
Surely wouldn't be all powerful in that case then, because it would be limited in what he was able to do.
This is what they do. They say that God has the ability to do everything that isn't a contradiction. And because he's all loving, he's going to do everything that will maximize love in the world. It will make it. He has made the maximally great world.
Joe's example of pain cuts off when there's no chance of survival. That what does that contradict?
What Trent is insinuating here, perhaps implicitly, though I'm fairly certain he's going to do it more explicitly, is that God had no choice. If God's goal was maximize happiness in the world, do a good thing for the world, right? And they're not necessarily the same thing, but you get the idea. Then what he's going to do is be limited in his options. And so he's going to have to choose the one that maximizes the greatness. And perhaps the way that you do that is you have to go, no, you actually do have to feel pain when being eaten alive by the spider. Like that's his. Look, I'm still manning him here. That's the best I can do.
It's all right. I won't say anything.
Okay. All right.
But
you convinced?
No.
Oh,
surprisingly,
okay.
I'm not convinced.
Now, this is God we're speaking about, right? And this is really, now I've done some help for Trent, I'm coming into your court, okay?
Yeah.
God is going to get us into heaven, right? Or at least, Trent's going there. I'm not, okay?
No.
All right? I'm so made as not to believe, and that's
the only
that's
requirement.
bad. I'm going to get annihilated at best, right?
Sharing love is not a requirement for getting to heaven.
No, it's not. It's God judges you on the content, not on the content of your character, but on the conviction of your beliefs in ridiculously stupid things.
Conviction is requiring strength, so it's not even the conviction of your belief. It's just specifically your belief.
Yeah, you can phrase it that way. Now, in heaven, what's going to happen? Well, it's a good place where there's not suffering. So if an all-powerful, all-loving God can create a situation where in heaven there is no suffering, we know that he can do this. And the question is, why hasn't he done that for Earth? Then you're going to have to come down into questions of, he needs to test people.
Yeah.
Well, how are you testing the koala by having him just annihilated by forest fires? What's going on?
Do koalas go to heaven? Do they get tested?
Apparently not. So why are you burning koalas?
So why do they get tested through pain?
Well, maybe as the fire happens, it's not actually burning them alive.
And
really
then,
what happens is it shuts off their consciousness and blah, blah, blah.
And I can see the argument for, us as adults, maybe we've got to go through some level of suffering in order to show our character. Why is that not applied equally to all people? And then why is that also not applied to children who are too young to have even formed a concept of self?
Yeah, this is another fair criticism, and that is that, look, if I have some obstacles in my life, you can argue that it develops my moral character. But if you have someone die because their mother couldn't pass on adequate nutrition, what fucking lesson does that teach to that child? And guess what? That child doesn't believe in your God.
Well, in fact, to the community, it's taught nothing either. Because the thing that was required was an evolutionary step. Because I know what you're driving at there. You're talking about essentially not being able to absorb nutrients from the sun, not being able to get enough food from
the mother will have too much pigment in the skin and therefore can't pass on
so
nutrients.
that's what you're driving at there. And so what does the community learn from that? Evolve faster?
You know what, that reminds me of bit of a tangent, but it reminds me of such a great line from Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that is, he was asked by people, listen, I heard that you sleep 4 hours a day and you train for all this time. I need 8 hours. What advice would you give me? And he goes, sleep faster. It's just great.
Hopping back to the point, because we're going to end up with too many tangents otherwise, but
probably
it's not my fault. Well, it is. What Trent seems to be doing is he's assuming that the system that we have is one where it's balanced, right? But that's clearly not true, because you get animals like, or just cats. I was going to say cats in Australia, but cats in general.
They're there now.
They no. I'm saying it's just cats around the world.
Oh, okay,
they're so aggressive in their hunting that they make a lot of smaller animals go extinct. I'm pretty sure.
No. I prefer testing their moral character.
But if the introduction of an animal to Earth can cause other creatures to go extinct, that doesn't seem like a balance of competition. That's not a balance of hunting versus survival, is it?
No.
Because, and let's also be honest, do all of cats kill for food?
Play.
They kill for fun.
Yep.
And the other one is, I think you've probably seen like orcas and dolphins.
Yep.
Where
Vicious.
they're just...
Yeah, basically, yeah. They are
they
very
just kill
nasty.
for the sake of it, and then they'll just leave whatever thing they've battered to pieces to sink. They won't eat it.
Yeah.
And
you're
when you've then got things that are doing harm for entertainment, we're now not talking in the realms of pain caused for survival.
Mm-hmm.
We're not testing their moral character because these animals don't go to heaven.
Yep.
So what is going on there?
Yeah, I know what they defend with, but it's untenable to me.
That's right.
They would say that the maximally great world needs...
Oh, fuck off!
I worry that the concept of animal, pain, for example, like God could create animals, instead of having pain, what if we just had a heads-up display that told us, hand is burning, move hand? Well, a lot of us would ignore the heads-up display and, our hand would become useless.
Well, the thing is, actually, on that, if it was a heads-up display where hand is burning completely filled your vision, you probably would remove it just so you could see again.
Yes.
So his example is not actually very good.
No, the other thing is that if we're still working with evolution by natural selection, that it's going to be those that take that seriously that are going to survive, whereas those that don't fail.
Yes,
and
if you're still working in a world of evolution,
Yeah.
even if it was a little light in the corner of your heads-up display, the ones that paid attention to it and carried that through their genes would be the one. Yes, you're absolutely spot on.
And we already know that you can cause people and animals to act in certain ways via evolution, via responses, without having to cause a lot of pain. So, for instance, you cut open an onion. Well, you start crying. Well, the onion didn't feel pain. There's no evidence that it felt pain. And yet, there's a stimulus that happened. And the reason it's doing that stimulus is it's trying to make it so that the predator goes, yeah, I'm not going to keep staying around this onion. That's causing me a bad time. Quite literally, I'm crying now. Very upsetting. And basically, the big problem here is that Trent is not addressing Joe anymore. So Joe talked specifically about the point of survival.
Yeah,
and
where it becomes
survival
impossible.
has become impossible. Yeah.
Whereas Joe's more broadly now just talking about responding to stimulus, essentially.
Trent is, yeah.
Okay, Trent.
Josh.
Josh. So he's only now just talking about a more broad responding to stimulus, but you've just outlined evolution would account for that anyway.
Yeah.
But for example, let's take... I know it's coming out of biology, but let's go to robotics, okay?
Oh, hello. Come on then. Yeah, let's go to your field.
It's my field.
Yeah, you're a robot. Everyone knows you're a robot.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you program into a robot... Well, I've actually done this. I built one as a kid, so it would follow the light.
Yes, I remember these.
It also had bumpers on the front of it, and if it hit a wall, it would then turn away from it. So if robots can have a simple sense response thing, why can't we? Why can it not be just a simple sense response? Why has it got to be pain?
For reasons perfectly sufficient to God.
So this seems to be... what I worry, the parallel here would be like, well, why can't God make people that are free but don't do evil? We qualify humans so much they're not really human or free anymore.
Free will can still exist where God only creates the people that he knows would do good.
Especially when it comes to the whole suffering situation.
Because they're still choosing to do it. He's just only chosen to create the ones that will choose to do it.
Yeah. But
then again, what does a choice mean, I suppose?
So what you're kind of relying on is the idea that God has middle knowledge. So he can create something and then know exactly what it may or may not do, which I think is a fair assumption. But someone who defends free will is going to want to argue that God actually doesn't have access to that information.
But the thing is surely he'd have access to, for example, say a likelihood, because a lot of the people that take certain actions have done so because of environmental factors or illnesses or even infections from things. So if he can, surely he knows about the condition of the world and the environment that people are going to be brought into. So could he not at least, we could reduce some of the problems here, surely, just by not having people born into an area where there's diseases that ruin your cognitive faculties and make you violent. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know? Rabies. Think of rabies.
Oh, rabies, yeah.
Well, that does to fucking every
Makes you terrified of water.
Makes you terrified of water.
So that you eventually die so God can challenge your moral character.
Why do these diseases and infections need to exist?
Maximally great world.
Okay.
Do you remember, like, the guinea worm?
Well, the answer that I'm typically used to hearing with some of these things is, oh, it was the fall. It's because Adam and Eve ate the apple.
God created the world. He put the apple... Oh, don't get me started. If you want to see us talk about the fall, then go watch the episode
one with
we did on
Gothics,
Gothics.
Yeah. That one annoys because it just doesn't make any sense at all.
Oh, she was such a pleasant person.
Why can't God make animals that don't suffer in a natural ecosystem? It gets changed and qualified so much they're not really animals. They're more like furry robots that God's like.
No, it doesn't. They can still be animals. You can. Oh my God! It's what we feel as pain is a nerve response to stimuli. We can change what that sensation feels like.
Mm-hmm.
God should be capable of changing what that sensation feels like.
Yep. I guess
that changing that sensation would not suddenly turn them into robots.
Well, this is where he is trying to draw a distinction. He's erring on cautious, right? Which is a lot of like the demeanor that he will give off and defenders of this will give off. And that is they want to say, look, if you make it so that the animal can't feel pain, then maybe what you're doing is you are robbing it of part of its essence. It's no longer really an animal. It's more of a robot because it's not. Perhaps if you can't feel pain, it just follows that you're not a agent, an entity, and that's where he's going with this. But my thoughts on this is
that's interesting though. If you define living things as only being able to feel pain, essentially, is one of the main requirements.
Sentient creatures, at least.
Yeah, that was where I was going. Is what does that do for non-sentient creatures? Because at that point, are they robots? Does he view them as robots?
Yeah, the way that he said it, I think you're correct. But let's just, suppose that he's saying it's about sentient creatures.
Okay.
So what he's getting across is that if you was to make it so that sentient creatures are not can't feel pain anymore, what impact would that have on their sentience? Could it be that as a sentient creature, you must be able to feel pain? And I think there's some merit in what he's saying, but it doesn't explain the gratuitous evil that we see right across the board. It doesn't explain cholera. It doesn't explain all of the nasty stuff that we see.
What he's actually doing by trying to go as broad as he is, I suppose, is he actually takes some of the bite away from Joe's argument.
Yeah, Joe is saying here is some really, really bad examples of evil in the world, of suffering. How is it that we can deal with this on a theistic worldview?
I feel like I got caught in his trap there.
You did.
Because, I'm trying to come out to this more broad conversation where Joe's like, no. The problem is it's gratuitous. If at the point of you're going to die, no matter what, at that point, why do you need to feel suffering?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
So it's a reframing.
Thank you.
Probably,
nearly got caught in that.
Probably not conscious, but like this happens a lot in these conversations, and you're not alone, man. Like I've been there. It's very easy to get pulled into. Wait, why am I fighting against this hard item rather than the crappy soft item that they put on the table? So effectively, what's happening is just Trent isn't dealing with the problem as Joe has expressed it.
Send it around. That's my concern.
Well, to me, it seems almost like a limitation of imagination. I mean, we just...
Yep. Call it what it is, Joe. It's a limitation of imagination.
Yes. Well, it's back to what I said at the beginning, isn't it?
Yep.
If we as human beings can think of a solution, and in this case, Joe is able to think of it while Trent isn't, then God should be able to.
I'm thinking, can we come up with an analogy that illustrates how absurd this is, right? Suppose that I've built a dam, and I've built the dam so that it necessarily, once every month, it's going to...
I was worried you were going somewhere else. I was waiting for the sword that is also a key that...
No, I'm not going for that. That's anyone watching, it's because of another video we made. I'll link it below if you're interested. It's to do with Prime. We won't call it Lord of the Rings. So if I had a dam, and this dam was built in such a way so that it will feed everyone.
Mhm.
But once in a while, what it's going to do is a little bit of cholera is going to come through. And the filter's not great. It's only going to, 10% of people that drink from it are going to die. I've built up this dam that it's causing a lot of problems. You've got this dam, and what happens is someone goes, look, this doesn't look like it was built by an architect that knows everything about the universe and that can do anything in the universe. Because especially if we add to it that he loves humans, he wouldn't build it this way. This is a very surprising fact.
Yeah, so if I go, what Joe's done is gone, I can conceive of a dam that doesn't produce cholera in 10% of people.
Yeah.
And Trent's like, well, maybe it has to be that way.
Yeah. He's saying, maybe, Joe, maybe what's going on here is that if God had made it so that 10% don't get cholera, then actually 20% will get cancer.
Oh, he's even gone to that far.
Maybe it just, it doesn't actually sufficiently test their character.
You know what he's done?
As a,
He's done, if some of them don't get cholera, they're not humans. They're robots. That's kind of what he's done with that.
Yeah, you're right.
Because Joe's argument is obviously, I can conceive of a world where we don't need this bad thing to happen.
Yeah, you're right. So he's saying, look, maybe he needs 10% of them to get cholera. Otherwise, they're not really humans. Yeah, you're right. And just as anyone would take this argument and go, what the fuck are you on about? We don't do it when it comes to theism. We go, no. This is cast in theological terms, okay? And I've got broad philosophical concepts. I'm going to talk about axioms, okay? I'm going to talk about axioms. I'm going to talk about pragmatic encroachment. I'm going to keep this voice on for the rest of the episode.
This is an epistemic argument, so I don't need to say that these are actually metaphysical possibilities. But so long as they're epistemically open.
Perfect. I don't need to prove that these things are possible or anything like that. I'm proposing a hypothetical.
Yeah. He's saying, here's a really compelling argument. Now, it seems really likely that the premises are fine. How do you want to tackle it? And essentially what their response is, it's possible that you're incorrect in the premise, therefore it's feasible and justifiable for me to deny it. And it's like, that ain't how it works.
It really bugs me when someone's like, oh, that's absurd, I'm not going to deal with that. It's like, just follow the logic, please. That's all I'm asking you to do is follow where the logic leads you.
Do you want to know what makes it worse? After being presented with this dam, and you go, listen, maybe they need to get cholera in order to be human. Then they're going to go, listen, I'm not dealing with your weird hypotheticals.
Well, that's kind of what
was that you just did? Yeah, exactly.
So yes, I'm very curious because, let's see.
As long as I can conceive of these various other ways that reality could have been, we can factor that into our Bayesian analysis. And it really seems as though God could have set up psychophysical laws that really are highly finely tuned in this sort of way, where they're, God has infallible foreknowledge of the various ways that things are going to go on. Surely he could have this precisely fine-tuned psychophysical laws that connect the suffering states that the organisms are in and their physical states, where it is actually privy to whether or not they're going to survive and so on.
Now, I love that when it comes to the finely tuned situation, what we've got is that a lot of Christians will say that the world is finely tuned. You can see it by looking at the birds, at the bees, at the mass amount of space that's empty and entirely deadly to us. You can see that this is finely tuned for us. And
this 10% of or less than 10% of the planet that we can live on.
Yep, exactly, yeah. So they're like, look, finely tuned. Joe's saying, well, if God can finely tune all of that, surely he can finely tune his system to exactly what he wants.
Yes.
And because he's all-powerful and all-loving, he's going to create the maximally loving state of affairs.
Yeah, and Joe's obviously deliberately using their language to get them to engage on this.
Yes.
So let's see where it goes.
And, okay, even if that makes them different than the animals that we do in fact have, my point then would just be, why not create... rather, I won't put this as a question, because questions aren't arguments.
This is one of Cameron's sayings that questions aren't arguments, and it's like they can be.
They can be. That's kind of it's the whole hypothetical thing again, isn't it? Yeah. Because depending on how you answer a question that is proposed, you could just be implying something. So,
have you stopped hitting your wife?
Perfect example. If I say yes or no to this, then the implication is at some point I have been hitting my wife.
Yeah, and I've just stormed my argument across the board.
So questions there can be an argument in there, depending on how it is presented. And it's when you then try to avoid it and you say questions aren't arguments, that tends to indicate to me is you know that the question that is asked is one that you cannot answer because of the damage it will do to your position.
Yeah. I mean, another way, you could quite straight up say, how is it that you deal with this observation under your worldview? That's a question.
Yeah.
And it's a very good argument.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If this is the case, and then for me it is this, how do you deal with it?
Yes.
It's a question that is also an argument.
Yeah.
My point is, it's more surprising that God created animals as we see them rather than animal star, like the ones that we are describing in this other epistemically possible scenario. That would be more expected.
Joe's describing God has created animals, and Joe has proposed animal star. Animal star being an animal that doesn't feel pain when it's about to die.
So which of these do you want?
My point is, it's more surprising that God created animals as we see them rather than animal star, like the ones that we are describing in this other epistemically possible scenario. That would be more expected under theism, the animals star, than we see animals.
Would you be... I'm curious if your eyes will roll or your response would be to a defense saying, how do we know animal star doesn't exist right now?
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe has outlined what we have is animals, and then animal star is Joe's proposed type of animal where it doesn't feel pain at the point of dying. So what Joe is saying is, why aren't all animals this thing?
Yep.
And then Trent has said is, how do you know that some of those animals don't exist? That doesn't actually deal with what Joe said.
And it comes back to, here is a really strong argument, and you would have to have this kind of view of animals to even have a chance of being able to deal with this argument. And Trent's response is, well, it's possible. It's possible. It's not probable. It's possible.
It's possible that some, but the argument would just essentially move on to, okay, we'll accept that some of Joe's proposed animals exist. The question now would be, why aren't all animals animal star? Why do we have some animals that are capable of feeling pain at the time of the death?
Sure. And
so it doesn't deal with Joe's argument at all. It just adds a new question.
Even if you want to say that it did deal with Joe's position, this is where I'm going to put my flag. It's not good enough to say, well, it's possible that the premise is false. Nowhere do we function like this. This is not something we do ever. We don't do this. And yet, when it comes to theological discourse, this is seen as a respectful thing to do. It's not. It's a really poor position.
Because it's very difficult to determine the inner lives of anything, much less animals.
The thing is that, theists will often accuse atheists of being hyper-skeptical, right?
Yeah.
And they've got a problem with that. This is the most skeptical view you could possibly hold right now that Trent has expressed.
Because, well, I can take what he's done there and just do it to Trent. Like, if you were to tell me you're in a lot of pain, well, I don't believe you because I can't tell for sure that you are in pain.
Could be false.
You know.
How do you know?
Yeah.
And the thing is how do you know someone's in pain? Well, you do it based on inference, okay? So you know what it feels like for you to put your hand on something that's going to burn it. It doesn't feel good. It hurts. You know, those koalas are probably having a bad time. Exactly. You look around you, you can see you're screaming. Yeah. You can see other humans react precisely the same way. Almost all humans react the same way to the same stimulus that you receive, and so you make this inference of, just as I feel pain, they're feeling pain.
Yeah, I don't know if he's heard of the word at all. It's called empathy.
It's called empathy. Yes.
Essentially, we know how we feel when certain things occur to us. The responses that we have to that are generally specific. So, for example, heating. If we see another creature going, we can assume that they're probably in pain because that's how we respond to it.
Yep. And then with us being mammals, you see it with other mammals. You see the koala in pain. So you know it's in pain.
To be skeptical then that creature is in pain, God, that is about as uncharitable as you can get, I think.
But this is what I mean where I say no one speaks like this in other domains of discourse. Because suppose we're talking about, you're telling me that you're in pain, and it's because you've stubbed your foot on, I don't know, let's just say that you managed to...
Lego.
Yeah, Lego, okay? You've hit that Lego hard, okay? And I've done Lego in the foot before, all right? And I know that it's painful. And I can see you're in pain. I can see you're crying. absolutely crying. You're in tears, man. Like you've had a real bad time with this. I can see there's blood coming out your foot. Like Lego shouldn't
big
be
bit of Lego.
They just shouldn't be built this way, but they are. Okay. If I was to, no one would take me seriously if I came up to you and I went, "How do we know that he's in pain?" How do we know?
Every single person would look at you like, "Are you an arse?"
Yes, precisely. But when it comes to defending good old God, no, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say.
I'm not happy with that. How do you know that not all that creatures actually feel pain? Is essentially what Trent's just done there.
Maximal giga-chad
It's like,
skepticism.
okay, we don't know 100%. However, I think that it can be assumed based on their reactions to what we would consider to be painful stimuli, essentially.
That is true. That's true.
And there is some, and I like risk being taken the wrong way here when I explain this, but there are like when you've seen, I've seen videos of like animals being like ripped apart, like on Reddit and stuff, just randomly, like a nature channel, and it's something like it's actually very strange. Like sometimes you'll look at the animal and they look peaceful, like they're being ripped apart, and they're just like sitting there like this, just like getting their leg like ripped off.
I get it, Cameron. I understand exactly how those animals feel because, to most people here, you might assume that I'm just sitting here quite peacefully while Steve's laughing his arse off. But my brain is being ripped to pieces by the stupidity of what you just said.
Cameron, this is what apologetics does to people. Okay, listen.
I'm like this on the outside, but on the inside, I'm like.
That's unbelievable. That's an unbelievable statement to make. It's like he goes online and he watches an animal being ripped apart. I don't know how Joe...
I'm just pointing at Joe. You won't see this because of the way it is. Joe is falling apart already listening to that.
It's just the most absurd statement, man. Like, God, imagine like you're in pain because of the Lego, all right?
Yeah.
Serious pain. And I look at you and I go, you kind of look peaceful. This is how much I'm going to justify the maximally loving world. Okay, I'm going to go, look, it kind of looks like Animal Star. When Reese steps on that Lego, he looks like he's not in pain anymore. This is just absurd.
Cameron, this is... I know you're big on your theism, but have you ever read a book that's not the Bible? Have you ever...
This is the
fuck. Have you ever done like a basic first aid training course sort of thing or anything? Have you heard of shock?
No, he hasn't heard of shock. Okay, they're peaceful.
He's gone so red.
So stupid, dude.
If you see someone who's had his leg blown off or whatever, they'll just be there like
peaceful.
They look so peaceful. Let's just overlay him saying this with like these videos.
I mean,
it's the most stupid thing.
But then,
God, religion robs you of humanity, man. Like,
let's just add further to it because what did he say?
They look kind of peaceful.
No, sometimes.
Sometimes you need it.
No,
you need it to be every time, Cameron.
Yes, you need it to be every time to have even start justifying this because most of the time, I'm pretty sure the animals in these cases are going to be fighting to free themselves. Well, Trent said they're in pain so that they can try and survive.
Yeah.
So they'll be fighting, they'll be screaming, they'll be...
Yep.
Oh, God, there's some horrible things I have seen from nature lately. Fucking nature, you scary.
You scary boy.
But there was, I think it was it a zebra? That, like, its entrails had been ripped out and it was kicking its own insides out because it was just it wasn't feeling the pain of it. It was just trying to get away from the terror of the situation.
Honestly, that sounds to me like it was in a peaceful state.
They look peaceful.
Yeah, it must have been.
Like it was doing just fine.
So that poor thing, once it had a few moments to, I suppose, calm down, probably would have just fallen over and died from the pain and the loss of its insides,
And if you want to use your noggin on this, right, you can say, look, we actually know humans that have went into shock and they didn't die. So we can ask them, were you in pain?
But shock is immensely dangerous.
You looked like you were having a really nice... You look just so peaceful. And then they'll tell you, no, it was the worst experience of my life. We've had it so animals that go through shock, they are fundamentally different afterwards. Like they change because of the trauma. Like all of a sudden they're like, I don't want to be around cars. I don't want to be around, whatever it was that triggered them to go into that peaceful state. Like so.
Well, it's not a survival
he says
thing.
He risks being taken the wrong way. There is no way you can say that.
Risks an eye roll. There was definitely some eye rolling that happened from the audience. I'm thinking so much of one time at my work, the hydraulics came down and took the tops of their fingers off. And they came down just holding their hand and they just went,
yep,
I think I need to go to the hospital.
Yep.
What do you think has happened there?
Peaceful. Very peaceful.
They were very, very white.
Animal star.
Like they're being ripped apart and they're just like sitting there like this, just like getting their leg like ripped off.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah. I love that he was just laughing through the whole thing while Cameron's there like, well, I don't know how to...
Can I just say that this is my favourite thing about doing YouTube? I don't have to pretend that this stuff should be taken seriously.
No.
Yeah.
No, Drew, I love you, buddy, if you're watching this.
Yeah. You do the good thing, bro.
You be nice to people.
Yeah.
We'll have the catharsis for people where we just mock the stupidity.
I think.
Yeah.
No, not yes, Cameron.
Yeah.
Not yes. Not sometimes they're in agony and sometimes they're in peace. It has to be that they are always in peace. Otherwise, you've got a problem on your hand. I mean, you've got a problem on your hand in any case, but like, you can't say sometimes they're not in pain.
I'm sorry, Cameron. You are not allowed to say yes after Joe has just contradicted you, because you made a point. So you can't agree with Joe explaining that you're wrong.
Well, let's exercise the level of skepticism that Trent and Cameron.
Unless he's flipped his position.
No. By yes, it's possible that he means no, and so we have to take this as a serious option on the table. You see, like this is totally possible.
So just to round that off, what Joe has said here is a problem for you. You said, here's a solution, and Joe has gone, that doesn't cover all of the problems, and then you went, yeah.
You can find videos on the dodgier parts of the internet of human beings doing exactly the same thing.
I mean, it is...
Alex, bro, as Peter Hitchens recently said, you just don't listen, okay? Look, if Cameron was watching them die, then no pain is happening at all. However, if you and I are watching them, then there's plenty of pain that's happening. That's how this works. It's like a rule, that's how this works. So please do listen more.
Yes, I think you've been terribly rude.
Terribly rude. I'm completely out of here. I've had enough. You're obsessed with drugs. You're obsessed with shock.
You're obsessed with the problem of evil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Unbelievable.
What are you doing talking? Don't talk while I'm telling you that you're rude.
Yeah. Don't interrupt me while I'm telling you you're rude.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it is a good point that we have to consider now the philosophy of mind and how do we have access to the mental states of others and so on.
But that, as I said earlier, that equally applies to humans.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have access to your mind, to your sense of feeling. However, I'm not going to work on the assumption that you don't feel pain.
Yeah.
Because I do. Why would we then not do the same for animals, given, one, how much DNA they share with us,
mm-hmm.
two, how similar in structure a lot of the bodies are to ours. They have nervous systems, for example. If they have all the things that make us feel pain, why would we not assume that they, having seen the structure of their bodies, also feel pain in the same way based on that structure?
We have every reason.
To think so. So I don't agree with Joe here at all. I think if we can assume other human beings other than myself feel pain, then I can grant that also to animals with nervous systems. And just before we move on to the next bit, do really like how Joe has now completely ignored Cameron and just moved back to the conversation he was having with Trent, because that was obviously a little bit more productive, I would say. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I would. And I have to say that, so some people question why philosophy gets a bad rap. And this is why. It's because apologists and theologians have essentially been parasites on philosophy. They go in there to try and give themselves a better optics to the world. It's like, no, I understand the philosophy. My views are serious. This isn't serious. This isn't a serious thing to say. When someone presents you with a powerful argument and your response is, well, maybe all of the information we have is wrong.
Yeah, it's...
Do you have any evidence for this?
I like being skeptical. There's a level of skepticism
like
becomes absurd.
They don't accept this level of skepticism anywhere, under any other condition. And because they abuse philosophy like this, it gives philosophy a bad name. It really does. Like, this is... it stuns me that we as a society take this bollock seriously.
Sorry, I know we're now moving back on to Trent, but was that Cameron's addition to this whole thing? Like, you've had this sort of back and forth about this hypothetical that Joe's presented, and Cameron went, well, sometimes when I watch weird videos online, the animals look like they're at peace. And that's the extent of what he's added to this conversation so far.
The next big thing he adds is going to make up for it.
Okay,
you're in for a treat.
I mean, it's a potentially problematic aspect that God doesn't clue us into this fact, that things suspiciously seem as though it's animals, not animal star. That might present problems of its own.
Just to sum him up there, essentially, why is the world so presented unintuitive if we were to work it out with this particular Christian worldview? Mm-hmm. If we're working off of the worldview that animals don't feel pain when they're dying, why do we have every reason to think that they do? That's what Joe's essentially outlining there.
Yep. And
which is a perfect point to make.
Yep, it is.
So a different approach to this whole Bayesian argument from evil is, what about skeptical theism? I feel like we should at least discuss skeptical theism. I mean,
wait, so Cameron's only input in that was to say then that, oh my God, that's terrible, Cameron.
Yep. So Trent's response was, it's possible that the premise is false. Yes. And Cameron's response was, when I watch dying things, they look peaceful.
Yes. Not a good showing by either of our theologians here.
And it's because it's a really good argument. It convinces a lot of people.
Yes.
Listen, you wanted to say that your God is all-powerful and all-loving. You can reap what you sow.
And I'm sorry, I do think that Joe presented that in a very easy-to-understand manner.
He did, yeah. That wasn't difficult to understand at all. But when your job is based on not understanding it, you're going to do a good job. Maybe. Okay. I don't know. It looks that way to me, but possibly they're just in pain.
We've got about a minute left of the video then, so what are we looking at here?
You are in for... I'm going to skip from this segment to another part of their conversation, and this is the gift that is going to change your mind on Cameron.
Okay.
Completely.
I'm picking up a healthy amount of sarcasm.
No. Me? Sarcasm? What are you on about, sir?
I mean, you said you prefer to live in a world where there is fear and suffering so that we can have the good of bravery. An example I've sometimes given is the example of someone like Martin Luther King being a great man, right? Because he overcomes this great evil. Surely we'd rather be living in a world where there were no racism and no need for Martin Luther King.
The reason that Alex is giving this example with Martin Luther King is that he's illustrating or taking a case where he sees something that's gratuitously evil. So you could understand, you know what, you're not going to get your food easily. Well, you need to travel to a high mountain to get it, right?
Well, let's accept their pain thing from earlier. We do need to feel pain for
moral development, whatever it might be.
Or even just for us to survive as creatures living in the world. For us to not be robots.
Correct. So on that assumption, you're going to say, okay, some suffering in the world is you need to spend some money to make some money.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, okay.
Now, the reason he's emphasizing Martin Luther King is because everyone today
racism
very much recognizes
gratuitous evil.
What does that, you have entire lives being destroyed over pigment in someone's skin. It is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
And that's why he's focusing on, surely the world would be better if this didn't happen.
Yeah, I suppose the response would be obviously, look, we had, essentially what Alex is saying is we recognise the greatness of what Martin Luther King did sure, but do we need the trade-off of suffering for hundreds of millions of people for bravery of one person?
Yeah.
Is that a trade-off that seems
predictable by theism.
Yes,
Yeah.
essentially.
No, it doesn't.
No, it really, really doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure the trade-off of two people suffering for the bravery of one person is something that I would consider to be worthwhile. But when you're talking the sheer numbers in comparison, it just does not seem to work out for theism. It doesn't.
Surely we'd rather be living in a world where there were no racism and no need for Martin Luther King. It sounds to me that in a lot of cases, when somebody says...
I just disagree. I mean...
You think it's better to actualize a world in which there
I think
is
it's more
racism?
valuable. I think a world that has that and has the accompanying evils is more valuable.
I am staggered. It is more valuable to have a world where humans do intense harm to each other because it has value to the souls of some people.
Based on such a superficial thing as skin colour. If someone thinks that that's the best of all possible worlds, you're never going to reach them with any reason whatsoever.
And what's worse is obviously not only does he think that this is a thing that God programmed into us, this sense of tribalism, which would then be good for going against that programming.
It would.
Weird test, but okay.
Yeah. Mysterious.
But to reinforce that programming, the book tells you to, essentially kill the people around you or take them as slaves.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to think about. Going against the Bible and going against the instilled values by God is a good thing.
That's how he tests you.
That's bizarre.
That's why he says the world is a better place for having this grotesque racism in it.
The world is a better place now for having overcome it, and that was worth the thousands of years of...
Yeah. So, like, basically...
Because bear in mind, we're not just talking the transatlantic slavery here.
No.
We are talking slavery that's gone back since before written history.
Yeah, Martin Luther is just an example of racism being a thing in the universe. Being a thing that humans do.
I'm starting with the slavery thing, and I'm working then towards just simple racism, because slavery goes back as far as recorded history, and it was obviously essentially outside your tribe. Racism is just an extension of the tribalism. It's just picking up on a particular category, because obviously when you're living next door to a lot of other groups that look like you, you're not going to have racism as such based on skin color, but you will have it based on that's not our tribe. It's just an extension of that. And he is... What the hell is the value of that? Because for thousands of years, like probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, overcoming that tribalism hasn't been a thing. Instead, it's been conquering.
Yeah, it's just been maintained.
It's been genocide, if we're totally honest.
Yeah.
I'm going to take over that tribe and expand my land. I'm going to take over the other tribe and expand my land. So the overcoming of racism that we've had in recent years, and obviously it's not gone, but you've got hundreds of thousands of years of what would be considered by today evil for the fact that we now have a sense of that being wrong.
Yeah.
That is absurd.
It's one of the most absurd statements I've seen any apologist say ever.
Sorry if I was a bit rambly there. I'm just trying to
it's a flabbergasted
process.
Yeah, like, you look like you're not in pain. You look like you're peaceful. So there's that. But it's like, suppose that we turn up at an atrocity where an entire civilization of people have been essentially or directly genocided because of pigment in their skin. And as we walk across the bodies and we can see all of the pain and anguish, he's going to look at it and go, do you know what, Reese? I think that the world is better for having this in it. I think that all of those people that are suffering, they're actually not suffering at all. They look rather peaceful to me. How can you convince someone with that mindset that the world is not created to be maximally loving? If you look at these atrocities and you think that this is the best of all possible worlds, fuck, man, nothing can save you when you're looking at like the worst of the worst and you just hand wave it away to go, I think the world's a better place to have it in.
I'm just thinking on things, because obviously my thing I like to look into is like history.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking of like World War One and World War Two, where at the end of the war, a lot of countries were obviously partitioned up and borders were changed, and a lot of places in the Middle East were altered based off of the religious sort of grouping. And all that has done in the years since is cause war and violence.
Mhm.
And he thinks we're in a world that is better for having that.
Yep. Another thing to be added to this, right? Why is it that we have white skin? Well, it's because there was an indiscriminatory selective process that was killing babies, innocent children, killing them, not based on the content of their character, not to test their morality, because they weren't, they didn't have sufficient cognitive apparatus.
I say it's testing their evolutionary speed.
Just testing their evolutionary speed. And by the way, one of the reasons why white people would be racist to black people is because there was a heavy selection against having black skin, right?
Yes.
So God built the game to make it so that white people would have these kinds of views. And Cameron seriously looks at it and says the world is a better place for having this in. That's an incredible faith. You were never gonna dent that. No wonder he's converted to Catholicism.
I was somewhat entertained, and now I'm just in this real despondent and miserable mood thanks to what he just said there.
Again, you look like you're in shock.
Because I kind of am. I'm going into shock. Let's bring the light in on my face so I get really
exactly.
white.
Yeah, you're really white, and you go from there. Yeah, exactly.
I can't believe he just said that.
What an incredibly sheltered view.
Well, yeah, it's almost as if he hasn't considered the evils and how far back they go. Because it's worked out well for a few people.
It's as sheltered as it is remarkably callous.
The pain, the suffering, like thinking, just in America, when you're thinking of like lynchings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a good thing to happen because it enhanced the moral character of some people.
This is the problem.
By them having a, that's terrible response.
Yeah.
It's and the fact that people then...
Mm-hmm. It's like you go to a community, right? And they end up... A white woman accuses a black man of sexually harassing her, right? There was a case where this happened in the United States, and the woman lied, right?
Yes.
And the man gets put up and he gets lynched. And you can see someone like Cameron in the audience looking at it going, I learned a lesson from this. Therefore, I can understand why the world has this in. It's just such a self-centered, disgusting thing to say.
It's what you said at the thing with Simon, wasn't it?
Mm.
This must be for the best somehow.
Must be. Absolutely. Also, that person that's hanging looks peaceful. Absurd. Absurd.
This is what that is what I would describe as delusional.
And that's why I say that I think we may be at a stalemate. Like when you make that move, we're just disagreeing about like our baseline axiological assumptions that we bring to the table.
Bullshit. You're not disagreeing about your baseline axiom assumptions. Joe is assuming your axioms in order to show that you have a problem. He's saying that under your paradigm, there seems to be a problem with the way that the world is. And Alex has given the example of Martin Luther King to go, look, here is a pretty grotesque example. How do you deal with it in your world? He's assuming your axioms.
Yes.
This is something, again, that apologists do. Whenever they're in the corner, they just go, listen, we've got different intuitions. Your intuition is to say that the world is probably not good from all of this rampant racism and tribalism and nastiness, and you probably think it's bad that there's been billions of years of suffering, right? However, my axiom, I take this just from the get-go, so my view is the same as yours in terms of epistemic quality, right? We're just doing it from axioms. My view is that everything is perfectly fine. This is, in fact, the greatest good that God could possibly achieve. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking back to the very, very start of this bit that we've been responding to with obviously what Joe was doing was, okay, so assuming that God is all-loving and all-powerful, why does he not create animal star, a type of animal, or all animals being animal star, where they don't feel pain at the point of death? in order to make that or to ask that question, he has to be assuming your position.
Yes.
Because he can't ask it of his own position.
Because he's not got a problem.
Because his own position doesn't have that issue to deal with.
Doesn't have that problem.
So what Alex has done here is to say, essentially, assuming that position again of an all-loving and all-powerful God, how do you account for racism needing to exist for so long when it's done so much harm to so many people?
Yes.
And the only benefit we've had is a few people like Martin Luther King that have done this incredibly brave thing.
Even he died, you know.
I know, but Alex is asking is, you've got a few people that have managed to do bravery.
Mm-hmm.
How do you account for the fact that to achieve that bravery, enormous suffering had to occur?
Mm-hmm.
And Cameron's gone, well, we're just working on different positions.
Yeah.
It's not responding to it. Again, like, I know you've cut a few things out to skip ahead to different parts of the arguments and make me laugh, but I don't know why you expected I was going to laugh at this, but...
just in a state of flabbergasted.
The things I've seen from Cameron, and this isn't the only time I've seen him do this, never seems to actually respond to what's being asked of him.
We're all bringing our own axiological assumptions. And if that's the one that you bring and that's the one that I bring, it's like, how do we advance from there? I haven't seen I don't really see a way out. I'm curious what your thoughts are on. Well,
we're not going to hear what Joe wants to do for his thoughts, but I'm going to give you my thoughts, okay, of how do we advance when we have different axioms, yeah? Well, my way of doing it would be to assume the other person's axioms.
Okay, so you're going to assume my axioms.
And then ask questions that would challenge those axioms.
Now, you see, this is where big brain stuff happens, okay? So you've assumed the axioms of my worldview to show that I have a problem, right?
An inconsistency, yes.
Well, when you get me to the corner, what I'm going to do is just go, you have different axioms to me.
Yes, I do, which is why I assumed yours in order to have this conversation.
But your axiom is that you're going to assume my axiom. Okay, so really, we're even, right? You've got different axioms to me. You look like you're peaceful right then. That's really good to see as well. All right, so...
God damn, man!
Okay, it isn't funny, but you know, like when you're in incredible pain and you laugh, and he would mistake you for actually being happy. That is kind of what I'm trying to achieve here with the video. Like, I am...
Joe, God, that's really frustrating for him to say that to Joe, because... Joe has explicitly adopted your viewpoint to show that there are issues with it.
Yeah.
And then you've just ignored him.
And what
unreal, man.
It is unreal. And what we've had is Joe says, here's a really compelling argument. Alex has bolstered it with an example of Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Trent say, it's possible that one of the premises is false. Brilliant. And then we've had Cameron go, they look peaceful anyway, and the world is better for having it in.
It's possible that one of the premises is false. We have no reason to believe that it's
none
false.
at all. You know,
it could be.
But it could be.
And then...
Problem of evil, baby. It works.
This is... Well,
listen, we get something funny.
Based on this conversation,
yeah,
the problem of evil still stands strong. They've done nothing here to suggest to me that they've got any way of accounting for it.
An irony that's really come through in this video. The problem of evil makes theists evil.
Yes.
They become evil in trying to find a defense around it.
Yes, when you're at the point of, right, well, God needs to be all good, therefore these bad things that happened were good. It's like, who's it you've been, is it Paul that you had with the...
Oh, Paul Copen, yeah.
With sports is slavery?
Sports is slavery, yep, same thing.
Yeah.
They both use the word contract. There you go. Anyway, thank you for joining in to this episode of Low Fruit. We will make sure we get back to the funny stuff. Perhaps we'll carry on with the gothic stuff.
I know we called this Low Fruit, but can we go a little bit?
Okay, what is this? Is low paste.
The fruit is rotten.
It's just paste.
This is 2-year-old manure at this point.
It is. It really is. It really is. Which looks like it stinks. But actually, it's very tasty. Okay?
I have no reason to assume.
No, I can't give you any reason. But how do you know that it doesn't taste of pure shit? You don't know, Reese. You don't know. And it's because we come at this with different axioms. Anyway, that is going to do it for us today. And thank you for tuning in. I'll give you the last word.
Bye.